Hello and welcome everyone to the first Anyline Anytime podcast of 2021. My name is Mark Babin and it's a pleasure to have you with us today for this exciting interview. We're kicking off the year in a very great way, an amazing way, welcoming Peter Fintl, the Director of Technology and Innovation at Altron, a global innovation and engineering consulting firm primarily focused on high technology and innovation. Peter is an expert when it comes to the technology and innovation surrounding the automotive industry, a topic we're certainly going to take full advantage of during this interview. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure having you here. We really appreciate your time.
Mark, thanks for having me today. It's a real pleasure talking to you, and I'm looking forward to an interesting discussion.
As well as my, it's going to be a great talk, and I can't wait to dive into these topics that we've been speaking about. So before we jump into the automotive industry, I'd love to provide a bit of background on you, what brought you to your current position, and also other projects perhaps that you're currently actively involved in.
Absolutely. My pleasure. So I'm an electronics engineer by trade, also completed an MBA. So I'm really coming from the technology side of business. I started my career now nearly 25 years ago in the biomedical field as a research assistant at the Medical Institute at the University Clinic of Innsbruck. And after some years, I changed from the medical field to automotive, and in that area, mostly powertrain developments. I worked for over 10 years, so globally for the major OEMs, also engine manufacturers. 7 years of this time I spent working in China, so I had the absolute honor to be a part of that magical rise of the Chinese market to become the top auto market in the world. So that was an unforgettable experience, which I'm very grateful for. And now since 6 years, I am with Capgemini Altron in my role as the Director for Technology Innovation. That means research programs, development programs are my responsibility, and also partly strategy consulting for our clients. Personally, I'm focusing on the automotive area, and my key topics are, of course, autonomous, connected, and electrified mobility of the future.
Wow. Well, that's certainly a powerful resume. The experience must have been absolutely amazing. And I think that provides some serious credential for the discussion today. So thank you so much for that quick summary. So let's jump right into the deep end. Now, knowing your comprehensive background that you just shared with us on the subject matter, I want to ask about the impact of AI within the automotive industry. So starting more general, perhaps, on this point. Now, not only looking at AI and autonomous vehicles, but also looking deeper at the process behind the scenes, the ones that perhaps people are less familiar with or simply oblivious to.
Absolutely. I think that's a good point, because the impact of AI for the automotive industry is profound. Certainly, when you talk about AI in the car, you think about robotic vehicles that will drive passengers safely around and make mobility services a whole new great business and all that. But it's much more, right? So artificial intelligence will touch all parts of that value chain. It's not only the product itself, but it's also the way how we create products in terms of engineering and development. Here is AI really destined to help and revolutionize potentially that process, but also how we manufacture the goods. So AI on the shop floor, this is one of the biggest levers for the industry to gain efficiency and create new exciting products and services.
Yeah, like you said, there's so much more that happens, and I think it's really important for people to recognize that as well, because it's so much more than, just that future dream of, like we see in every futuristic movie with cars driving themselves and all of that. It's so much more in depth, and there's so much happening behind the scenes. But of course, and we'll touch on it a bit later, but there's so much more that can be done to facilitate that growth. So I really look forward to getting to that. So, in your introduction, obviously, you mentioned the rise in the Asian markets with vehicles. So, I'd love to touch on a sensitive subject for Europeans, and that's looking at how European auto manufacturers, such as Germany. I remember growing up, Germany was always the king of innovation. Everything that was innovative on a new car came from a German automotive group. But in recent years, we've certainly seen that slip, and we've seen other markets like the Asian market, manufacturers based there, like you mentioned, they've really become king of the hill when it comes to innovation with vehicles, processes, certain aspects of the vehicles themselves. So I'd love to know your impact on what caused the German market to fall behind, and then, of course, how do you expect them to return to be king of the hill?
Right. So that's a very tough question, Mark. So as you know, if you look past 70, 80 years in the automotive history, you see that some decades have been dominated by manufacturers of certain countries. You know, there were years where the Americans were the pinnacle of luxury and engineering. The British also had very good years. Then came the Japanese along, and then in the past, as you said, 10, 15 years, Germany really not only occupied sweet spot in luxury and innovation, but also when it comes to mass market vehicles, the German manufacturers did very well and consistently rose to the top producers in the world. So in the last years, Germany had to take some beating. You know, there were on one hand the public perception was that in the hot topics like autonomous driving, Germany is not really the pacemaker anymore. Tech companies from the Silicon Valley are doing this. Also, in terms of future propulsion, there was the one or the other scandal, which definitely did not help in the public perception to cement the innovation leadership image of the German manufacturers. And last but not least, other companies were faster, better in marketing when it comes to bringing electric vehicles to the road. So indeed, there is a pressure for the German OEMs to put their act together and not to lose their place in the ranks. But if you public perception image beside, if you look at the cold hard facts, you know, selling statistics, product pipelines, and functionality of the products of the market, I think the German automotive industry is in a good direction. Yeah, the product portfolio for electrified vehicles is filling up, right? Also thanks to governmental measures, the sales of electric vehicles are really taking off, and the companies, most of the companies, they have it's not finished yet, but on a good way in the progress of making a cultural change, right? Away from seeing the internal combustion engine as the only solution for the automotive industry, towards a more technological open solution, mostly battery electric vehicles, but for some manufacturers also fuel cell vehicles. So they work actively on that direction and want to keep their base. So that's a good thing. In terms of a very popular topic, you know, automated driving, autonomous vehicle, clearly the pace is given by American companies at the moment, at least in the public opinion. And those companies, they're good at marketing, they're good in development, without a shadow of a doubt. But they are also, some of them are also willing and able to integrate the clients much closer in their development process. So we're talking about the famous beta versions, right? And this is a huge difference to German or European engineering. Germany especially has a very specific angle when it comes to product and functional safety. So giving half-baked solutions in clients' hands, this is not something you want to see from them. And that's also one point where the development might look a little bit behind, right? Because those iterations are not publicly available. One thing, but on the flip side, these tendency to have excellent safety in the products, this understanding that products need to have an excellent safety, that also leads to things like Germany will be the first country, or one of the first countries in the world, who have a real legal framework to bringing automated driving, specific use cases for automated driving on the roads, right? So mid of this year, Germany will have a law for the highway pilot, right? That users can safely and legally fine use this function on the roads and in the equipped vehicles. So that's a thing where Germany is definitely making the pace in an area.
I love that last point as well. So the fact that legislation and certain laws are going to be coming into place that allow for these types of things, that should only propel that development then in your eyes.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's necessary. Clearly, it's a huge technical achievement when you see these pilot programs in the U.S., in Arizona, or in California, where vehicles drive around. But as said, those are test cases, right? And it's only done with a special permit. But for cases like vehicle logistics, highway pilot up to 60 kilometers per hour, valet parking, and all that stuff, so that will be a standard use case or a standard legal case in Germany by mid of this year, and that's a huge step forward for the industry, and it will push that the adoption of those technologies in the German market.
Yeah, it really should allow the whole industry to push for that as well, and I think we would see the similar in North America with those following again. So perhaps leading in other ways, we'd see the European market to propel the industry as a whole rather than individual
Clearly,
things.
For me, this is another example, Mark, where Europe can pace the way. It's like with for example, the European General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. Many laughed about it, because it makes everything so complicated. And is this sort of protection really necessary? But it turns out now, after a year or two of implementation, that it is the gold standard. And many more countries globally will adopting it. And I personally have the feeling that this is a golden opportunity for Europe if this framework, the legal framework for autonomous driving, it can be affected in Europe and will then be a role model for many other countries in the world.
That's good to know that there's still opportunity beyond, propelling the industry as a whole rather than individual elements. I really like that. That's great to know. So thank you so much for that. Now, you touched on this a little bit in that previous question, but I want to dig a bit deeper when it comes to fleet management processes. Now, some of our partners, when we speak to them about the industry, we know how complex it's filled with complex and time-consuming tasks that don't need to be done manually, but we hear it from our partners all the time. So for you, where do you see the potential optimization here? Now, looking specifically at companies who perhaps haven't gotten into AI processes or optimizing those processes, where do you see the opportunity within this fleet management industry?
So generally for fleet management and logistics, if I may extend your question a little
Please.
bit, Mark. So we all hear about the buzzwords of 5G, edge, AI, and so on. So yes, technology per se is not the benefit. But in that case, the opportunities you get from these technologies, they are huge, and especially the topic has mentioned the whole logistics area and fleet management area. So it really starts from the assembly line to bringing the vehicle in client's hands. And here the impact of those technologies, they are huge. I think for vehicles, they are valuable. They are currently vehicle logistics. So they're valuable goods. They consume a lot of space and need manual interaction for shifting around. And this will change with the help of 5G Edge AI. So very soon, vehicles will roll off automatically from the assembly line and drive themselves to the logistics area, right?
Wow.
Notify that, and their whole interaction with which requires human capacity will be much reduced, right? So that's one example. That's one example where those technology can help. Same for the whole fleet management business or processes and the rental car business. So in the future, that whole interaction, the client touch points, that will become much more seamlessly, right? So you don't need to get a physical key anymore. The vehicle drives at the airport. The vehicle you rented at the airport, it will drive to you. It will pick you up, right? And the same when you return the vehicle. So on all these automation, as said, it's not only in the product but also the processes behind, and also the whole interaction that will be much more digitized in the future.
It sounds so futuristic to have you say the car will come pick you up, but it's a realistic future for us. This isn't something in the movies.
No, absolutely. The technology is here to large parts of the technology, that the car can drive itself and so on, under external supervision. That's in the cars of today already. And if you equip the surroundings, yeah, in a controlled environment like you have at the assembly line or in a special parking garage at an airport, this is a use case you can have right away.
Wow. And there's obviously multiple steps to get to that point, but I think what you're saying is we're headed in that direction confidently.
Clearly, the technology is there in Germany. We will have, as said before, the legal framework for that within 2021. So that means the floodgates are open.
Wow. Yeah. And once those are open, the development can start or has already started, but will start to be deployed. That's
Yeah,
brilliant.
right.
So I'd like to change page a little bit here and touch on a really fascinating topic, and one that we here at Anyline are continuously surprised by, but the whole industry around counterfeit parts and the gaps that exist within the traceability of this. Now, I read recently that worldwide, the automotive industry loses around $12 billion annually due to counterfeit parts. And that's not even mentioning the loss of life and the safety risk that goes with these counterfeit parts and the danger that surrounds that. So can you help to highlight and shed some light on the importance of having digital processes within the auto parts sector? And then obviously we don't want those numbers to rise. And we know there's OEM and legislative issues here, but really building that bridge between, showcasing the need for automated processes just based on mass.
Clearly, yeah. I think counterfeiting, it's a serious problem for many industries, and in areas like automotive or aerospace or medical application. So that's not only a loss of revenue, but it's a serious safety risk for users, for consumers, by using counterfeit parts. Yeah, and here the industry, in the past, it was the typical case of, ooh, what do I do if I use counterfeit brake pads or something? Yes, that's a small issue, but could have a serious safety incident. But in the future, the vehicle is moving to become from a physical goods a cyber physical system. So we are talking about the software defined vehicle in the future. So this counterfeiting, at the moment we look at physical stuff, but in the future we also need to look on software parts or complex mechatronic system, to ensure that the integrity, the safety of the vehicle is not compromised, and if there are any breaks in that system, that these breaches are identified and communicated to the user that something is wrong. So I think in the future, it's not only about having proper counterfeit measures for physical goods. Typically it's serial number reading, it's embedding RFID, it's securing the value chain by blockchain across multiple steps of the value chain. So those are the typical aspects. But in the future, it's much more to that, how to integrate those physical measures, right, with the bridge of product integrity in the domain of software.
That's really good to know that we're looking much more beyond just the physical. And it's a really, really great point to bring up, because it makes so much more sense when you think about it. There's so much more than the physical to the cars, especially when we're looking at the future with AI being more actively involved in the actual use of the car. And counterfeit parts in that aspect could cause huge problems.
Absolutely, and here we are not only talking about the wrong code, right? But also, are we sure that the integrity of the whole development chain has never been compromised? So imagine an AI, a neural net, which whom you sneaked in wrong training material, right, or wrong test
Mm-hmm.
material you prove it against. So that would be a serious safety issue, and all that aspect need to be handled.
need to be accounted for. Absolutely. So
Absolutely,
that
yeah.
really feeds really well into the next point I wanted to bring up, and that's more to do with that tracking and tracing and that traceability
Mm.
of certain aspects. So moving to a future outlook, looking at sustainability within the industry, can you share some of the methods and the importance of tracking and tracing? And we just mentioned a few, but looking throughout the entire automotive industry, so beyond just counterfeit, but from supply chain to manufacturing.
Mhm. Absolutely. So I'm glad you mentioned the sustainability topic because this is a real field where automotive OEMs can make a real difference, yeah, in the not only industry but also it will become a decisive factor for selling their goods to consumers, yeah, no matter it be a physical car or a service in the future. So sustainability gained much momentum and the shift to electrification, right? So driven by the CO2 regulations overall, the shift to electrification really put that topic in the limelight to the end consumers. You know, when it comes to batteries, some battery chemistries they require rare earth materials, yeah, like cobalt, manganese, whatever, and the sustainable and ethical correct sourcing of those materials, that's a huge issue. And many companies now have declared that they not only want to be CO2 neutral, right, in a couple of years, but also to ensure that that whole process of the product is ethically done in the proper way. So here to securing these value chains, right, from mining of those materials to the processing and finalizing of the products, this usually spans literally across the globe, right, from Africa to Asia to America to Europe till it lands in a vehicle. So this is a huge challenge, and making this safe and realizing that goal, it is not possible without digital tools like blockchain and all that stuff. Yeah, so that's a huge field for the automotive industry.
And so, with so many variety in the processes, I guess when it comes to some type of solution that can collect data, some type of data capturing tool, I think
Yes.
perhaps a lot of companies aren't willing to make that transition or that jump because they have their processes in place. They don't want to alter what they do to match perhaps a data capture solution
Mm.
that has to, like A has to equal A. But I think it's really important to know and for them to know that having a custom solution here is not only possible but available very, very quickly. So they can have their processes and then develop a tool to meet their processes. So I guess the specific needs for each processing company can really be answered by a custom solution. Correct? That would
Mm.
make sense to you?
Right. That makes sense, Mark. There is another angle I would like to bring in.
Please.
So we talked before about, for example, sustainability. Yeah. So the whole world is hopefully moving towards a circular economy where we are reducing waste and ensure uh, a nice place to live for whole humanity in the years to come, so 2050 plus. And if we want to come from the current model, how we produce things, how we create a lot of waste also during that process, to a circular economy, there is a need to touch process. Right, so we need to change, but the key still remains, and this is true what you said, that the tools, the solutions, the applications, they need to fit to the best, to the optimum process. So, and also here, no matter it be on a high flight level or if it is specifically on scanning or making the production system understanding the goods, right, by recognition systems and so on. So the best solution is to really use a CAPA framework or reference architecture, which has the capability to be adapted to your specific target process, right, and not the other way around. So this time is over where we adapt our working way and processes to a given IT framework that is yeah, not adaptable, right?
Mm-hmm.
This time is over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, brilliant. I love that. So we've spoken a lot about the future and the realism of the future in this industry, but I guess to kind of wrap up the discussion here, I'd love your opinion on the future of the industry itself, mostly related to the
Clearly.
biggest
Yeah,
changes in the
sure.
next year.
Yeah.
Where do you see them and what do you see being the largest impact?
Mm. So, as we say at Capgemini, yeah, the future of the industry is intelligent. So it means that the intelligent use of data, so that's the major driver for the future success of companies and of the society. So it's about intelligent products, clear, intelligent operations, right, the manufacturing processes, and also intelligent services throughout the life of the product. And what does that mean? It is we need to bridge the gap between the classical IT, between the OT, right, that makes all that happen, and between engineering, product engineering of all that. So this closing that bridge, that will enable the next step of the industry. So the profound impact of key technologies like 5G, Edge, and AI. So this will, as said, will be felt across the whole value chain, and this the proper use of those technologies, right? It will manifest itself not only in great products and services, but also in sustainable future revenue streams.
So really bridging that gap is the future. When it comes down to
Absolutely.
it, no matter which elements we're talking about, it's connecting them as easy as
Exactly. Yeah.
possible. Okay. Brilliant. Well, that's great. That really wraps things up perfectly. Puts a nice little bow on top of the conversation to know that it comes down to the simplicity of that. So super fascinating talk, Peter. I really, really appreciate your time here today. I've learned so much personally, and I hope the audience has as well. But we really appreciate your time today. And yeah, we look forward to what the future brings. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. It was really an interesting discussion. Thanks for that. And also, it was a real pleasure talking to you. Yeah. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And to everyone watching, thank you so much for being with us today. I hope that you've learned something just as I have. As we mentioned, a very fascinating talk, plenty to take away. So I hope that you were able to do that. Again, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week for another great interview. You're not going to want to miss it. We have a good one lined up for you. So until then, stay happy, stay healthy. We'll see you next week.